BIM is an umbrella term that everybody uses nowadays at various conferences. I would like to maybe veer away from the topic of BIM, because that's what the conference is all about, and move more towards the people behind BIM, because they are the key assets. Before I begin, though, I'd like to show you two slides that I copied off of a doctoral thesis produced by our students. These were students from postdocs studies in the management of investment projects. These two slides present the idea of BIM in its fundamental form. It's like a Rubik's Cube that you need to solve, but oftentimes you just paint it instead of solving it. If you actually paint it, you're going to lose down the road. The paint is going to peel off, and it'll become clear that the Rubik's Cube was never actually solved, and that will lead to failure. Truth be told, the people of BIM, those who solve this Rubik's Cube, are the key essential assets. It takes tools to implement BIM. We talk about those a lot, software. Processes, number 2, and number 3, people. Those are the key assets here, because they are the ones who are going to be using the tools and the processes. Those are the vital points on the agenda. Who are they? When we talk about the BIM people, what comes to mind is something I'm going to tell you in a little bit, but what we should think about is the BIM modeler, somebody who can use ArchiCAD or other tools, but they can all use those tools in line with the BIM methodology. We also have the coordinator, who can bring different disciplines together into one joint model. And we have the BIM analytics specialist, who use different aspects like cost making. Sometimes BIM models cannot be efficiently used for costing purposes. And then we have managers of information. They often appear at the commissioning party. They somehow stand in the sidelines, but in actuality they are responsible for managing many processes, including CDE processes that we heard a lot about today. What comes to your mind when we mention the BIM people? You probably think of the BIM manager. Let's focus on those people. Everybody wants to be the BIM manager. Everybody who comes close to BIM wants to be this head of all heads, the boss of all bosses, and puts that on their business card. The BIM manager title is definitely overused, because we meet them, but they're not actually BIM managers. They're just people who are most knowledgeable when it comes to BIM in a given organization, but they're not really managers in that regard. I went to one of the conferences the other day, and I saw people showing on their backs BIM managers believing and practicing. So I thought up 3 categories: people who know more or less, but don't put that knowledge into practice. Those are believers, but not practicing. We have those who do not believe, but they do implement BIM practices because they were told to do so, because of the expectations of the organization they work for, but they're not really convinced. And then we have those BIM managers that we really care most about, those who believe and practice. Let's focus on them. because that's what it all really comes down to. Believing and practicing BIM managers come to your companies from where? You begin things by purchasing tools. You want to create models, right? What follows from that is a company that delivers those tools. The company asks BIM managers to go to you and help you implement those BIM tools, and their tasks are to efficiently implement BIM tools at your organization. But the question at that point is their goal the same as yours? When they think about efficient BIM implementation, do they have the same thing in mind as you do? BIM has become so trendy, so that now everybody who is even remotely close to BIM puts BIM manager on their business card. Relying on them sometimes might be a burden to you because they become the boss of all bosses, and it will always be up to them as to whether your BIM implementation and the BIM as a tool will be efficient down the road. We don't want it to become an expense or a burden. But let's assume that the BIM manager that showed up in your company is a believer and is a practitioner, and he can help you efficiently implement BIM as you want it to be done. You have to get things started by selecting the right tools. This graph presents the efficiency of different tools, different pieces of software. Let's assume that you have a vendor of software by a given producer, and you sit down at the table with your BIM manager and analyze each piece of software with regard to how much it meets the expectations of your company and your projects. This begs the following question: are there no other tools out there? Maybe there are. Maybe there are other vendors, other suppliers that have different portfolios. What were to happen if we joined those two forces, joined forces of or joined the offers of 2 or 3 different vendors? The previous speaker talked about the Świętokrzyński campus. You probably noted the broad range of producers, of vendors that came on board at that project. The BIM manager in question can select the best tools or join those tools into one single ecosystem. If he actually plays on your team, he is going to focus on finding the best solution for you. If he's not on your team, he is going to push his own product. But let's assume that he is a believer, he practices, and that he is on your team, and that he selected the right tool set for your goals, which are to maximize your proficiency and efficiency. You're halfway there. You have the tools, and now what? You buy the tools, you get training, but BIM is more than that. You need knowledge. How to use the tools in line with the BIM methodology. So basically, you have to know more than how to use the tools, how to model the right aspects, but you have to be able to model them in line with the BIM way of thinking. I'm sure you've seen many projects that were not done in such a way and were useless for costing purposes. They look great on the surface, but they are not designed and not produced along with the BIM methodology. What else do we need? Standardization. We can't go into detail on that.
Nie ma czasu teraz na to, żebyśmy szczegółowo sobie porozmawiali na temat standaryzacji
for lack of time. But standardization requires a certain process that is tried and true. Even if you didn't have BIM, standardizing would give you savings. We've heard so much about that. There's been research done on it. And when you are talking about BIM, the effects are even bigger. The third aspect, BIM processes. What kinds of processes are we talking about? The commissioning parties always ask us, oftentimes ask us, why do we do that? Why do we put that information into the model? Who should it go to, and how is it going to be used? Well, the answer is we don't do it art for art's sake. We actually want to deliver business results in the form of savings and higher profits, to name just a few. These processes are there to help us deliver those results. The productivity bars presented here should grow when we implement those measures. Now let's look at the beginning and the end. The effect was produced by the BIM manager, who is a believer and a practitioner, and who applies on your team. It is all up to him and down to his activities how your processes are going to look. Are you going to be part of the BIM methodology or not? The BIM manager holds the key. His efforts and your determination should translate into your success. But sometimes it is very hard to achieve. You don't see the effect because some of the elements are missing. A beam or a wall might use the wrong beam, and the costing party was using the wrong elements when doing the expenses and did not count a beam as a wall, even though it looks like one. I don't know if it is for the lack of knowledge of the people who implement BIM or because they could take a cursory approach. The BIM models that we have seen delivered to the general contractor contain simple yet dramatic errors that make it impossible to actually apply those models.
Tej jesieni, proszę Państwa, było bardzo dużo różnego rodzaju konferencji BIM-owych.
This fall featured many BIM-related conferences, and I remember going to one particular conference where I presented or listened to a presentation on the first ever in Poland BIM implementation in a project. I'm not going to provide you with the name of the conference. It doesn't matter. There were 3 people speaking: the commissioning party, the BIM manager, and the designer. The implementing or the representative of the software vendor was talking about the piece of software in high superlatives. He boasted his solution left and right. He talked about the file exchange system. Everybody seemed to be satisfied, although it was too early to be satisfied. The designer then replied by saying, yes, they learned about BIM. Everything seems to look great and seems to be working, but in the implementation phase, these models turned out to be a little too large for the demand of this particular project. Then it turned out that the designers don't understand some of the standards, are not knowledgeable in those, and download files from different parts of the world, put them into the model, and the level of detail of those is too high with regard to BEP. So they're trying to fix things up with an old rusty wire instead of working smoothly. I remember this old lady who groaned and said, "What about motivation?" the mobilization phase. Before you begin modeling anything, you have to make sure that the tools that you have will work for a particular model. You don't want to test that during the process. Maybe the BIM manager was unaware of this methodology, or maybe he was spiteful. But all in all, he was asking for trouble, because what he did was actually like jumping into a swimming pool with no water in it. If you do that, you don't know if you're going to crash or not. Going through the mobilization phase, you can test to see if the water is there, and if it isn't, you can put the right cushioning so that you don't hurt yourself. That will turn into a dramatic situation to us. We want to mitigate risk and not multiply it. We want to eliminate collision and not increase the risk of it occurring, especially later down the road when the model turns out to be insufficient and doesn't want to open up. It all has to be tested during the mobilization phase. We have to mitigate risk and not multiply it. Let's get back to our BIM manager, who is a believer and a practitioner. What makes one BIM manager a good person and another a bad person? Well, we have those BIM shamans, so to speak. They are often defined as people who have insufficient knowledge, who don't analyze the workflow within an organization. They impose their solutions that are inadequate for the requirements of an organization. Of course, we don't know everything, and I don't claim to know everything, but it does well to admit that you don't know everything, and that you then can listen to the needs. But these BIM shamans focus on the 3D models. They seem to be highly opinionated and knowledgeable, but they actually cloud your judgment. They don't explain to your workers how to work with a particular model. They don't work with the documentation. They try to drive this vehicle in manual mode, and they turn people off to BIM. Many stakeholders resign from using BIM because they see no result. They see that the results were not implemented. What is missing is the analysis of the organizational culture. The solutions that are imposed top to bottom don't work oftentimes. I've been working with large BIM projects in Poland and abroad, and I've met many a BIM manager who are not BIM managers in actuality. They just pretend to be so. They're actually BIM specialists, but in different disciplines, in modeling, model analysis, but they don't have the full picture. They don't see the entirety of the process. Why? Because BIM managers sometimes are expected to be jacks of all trade. They're nominated into that position. They don't look for solutions enough. They turn themselves into BIM managers by their executives. They don't even have time to learn in depth. But let's forget about those BIM managers for a while, because I'm sure that your organizations have other positions similar to those. For example, BIM coordinators, people who coordinate matters, who oversee the processes of BIM model implementation. It is up to those whether the models that come out are digestible to the general contractors. Let's focus on those BIM coordinators. What knowledge are we talking about? What's competence, skill set? I work with investments that have a lot to do with the public tendering procedure, and the documentation for that often requires experience, but the experience is not defined well enough. We don't know who the BIM manager is and what they have under their belt. I remember the examination for the contractor for the position of BIM manager for the Zator Beltway investment project, and it seemed that preparing that tendering procedure should be a cinch. We prepared the examination it took us about 4 hours, but then it took us about a week to make sure that that exam did not infringe upon the regulations of the public procurement law in Poland. People who are considered BIM specialists came to this exam, or would come to this exam, and the exam results are passed back to their employer, and that can translate to whether their company gets awarded a contract or not. It is a huge mental burden on the individual in question. I believe that instead of such examinations, we should just have certificates and exams that are to be passed in order to get a certification. Anyone then could try to take this exam without their employer knowing it. It would be much more objective, it would allow for much more time and be more credible and less stressful for the participants. Well, we have many certifications out there, most often coming from the producers. I think Autodesk also passes this kind of certification, but it depends on whether the applicant knows how to use the tools of this particular vendor, and the exam should be more about the overall knowledge in BIM methodology. It should not be narrowed down to only one type of software or one vendor. Take a look at the certification that we propose, the European BIM certification organization. We try to have 3 goals in mind. First of all, regardless of the kind of software that you work with, you should be able to pass this exam. We want to work with open standards and only those, and we are very stringent in the way we define the competences that are required. So we know and make sure that once somebody passes this exam, they can get the certification to their employer and list the competences that they have acquired.
że Państwo macie świadomość tego, jakie kompetencje powinien mieć BIM koordynator. Mnie się też tak wydawało do momentu, kiedy nie wyszliśmy.
I thought that I knew who the BIM coordinator should be until I actually delved more in depth. They should know and use the ISO 19650 standards. They should be able to correctly export files in neutral formats, which isn't that simple. They should be able to check the information flow through the common data environment. That is BIM stage 2. As a necessity. The list of competences is very detailed, and hopefully based on that list we will be able to verify the BIM personnel's competences, because we do believe that the BIM managers in question are key assets in a company. The BIM personnel are key to the BIM processes being implemented the right way, and through all of those processes we guarantee that there will be water in the swimming pool you're going to be diving into. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I want to extend words of gratitude to the organizers for inviting me, and I hope that you will gain a lot of insight during the rest of the conference.